I'd like to talk tonight about something which apparently is global. And it started really last week. And I'm sure everybody's walking around stupefied in terms of what happened with Donald Trump and America. What is going on and how do we understand this based on the divine agenda? Now, obviously, that's not an easy question to answer. But I'm going to attempt to provide or to offer an understanding of what it all means. Of course, based on the divine plan. It's my understanding and my interpretation of what is going to happen. There will be people, obviously, who will disagree with me, but that's fine. But do they have an understanding of the divine agenda? So that's what I want to do, is offer a rational understanding of what is transpiring and what it all means. I'm going to introduce ideas which I've said before, but I'm going to tremendously elaborate on them and provide you with what I consider to be tremendous evidence that this is the interpretation. So whether you agree or not, your choice, but at least you'll hear some type of a understanding that makes sense at the level, and actually it's really a very profound understanding of what is happening to Trump. Because I believe the whole concept of what's happening to Trump in many ways is messianic, as I will demonstrate and point out. Before I begin, however, I want to dedicate a shiur. This shiur should be a blessing and a merit for the health and success of the families of Regina Bas Yosef Reuven and Yeshaya ben Yisrael, Binyamin Wolf, ben Tzvi Hersh, Baruch ben Binyamin Wolf. And their neshamas should see a tremendous aliyah. Now, I want to point out also, today is a very special day. Probably most people look at me and say, well, what's special about what? Today is the Yortzeit of Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. And every year, it's interesting, for 42 years, I've been offering a lecture, a shiur, on his Yortzeit. He passed away. He was born in 1707, long time ago, and he passed away in the year 1747. He passed away in Eretz Yisrael, in Akku. He died in a plague, a cholera epidemic. And unfortunately and tragically, he was about 40 years old. And he died, his wife died. I think her name was Zipporah. And I think he had a son also. And he also died. Of course, that represents an enormous tragedy because what the Ramchal did in his 40 years is astounding. And it is said that the Vilna Gaon wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael. That's pretty well known. But for some reason he decided to change his mind and he came back to Vilna. And it is said that why did he want to go to Eretz Yisrael? Because the Ramchal lived in Akko. That's where he moved. And the Vilna Gaon wanted to meet him and learn from him. In fact, he said to Vilna Gaon that the Ramchal had a knowledge and an understanding of the divine plan greater than anybody else and as much as any human can know. That's an incredible, astounding statement. What has to also be said about the Ramchal, so today's is Yortzeit, and I of course want to dedicate this shiur to the memory and to the Aliyas Neshama, which means an ascent, the elevation of the soul of Rabbi Moshe Chaim Sato. What is unusual about the Ramchal is that he was an incredibly organized thinker. And not only was he organized thinker, but he had this tremendous command of many, many areas of knowledge, which you don't find. In fact, that he's called a Chacham HaKoilel, a wise man that comprehends many, many disciplines. I mean, he wrote, besides Hashkafa, which is Jewish machshava, thinking, and so on, but he was an incredible Makubal, Kabbalist, one of the greatest really who ever lived for the last 500 years. And he wrote plays, he wrote poetry, he wrote a second Zohar, you see. In fact, he wrote a 1,000-page commentary on Koheles, which a great deal of his form are lost, or I should say they're lost because they were buried. And he had a tremendous amount of friction in his life, unfortunately, because he was very young. In fact, he writes that when he was 20 years old, he had Gilu Eliyahu, the revelation of Eliyahu, and he had many departed souls that used to come to him and learn with him, which is amazing, and he described it, and so on, you know. So we're looking at an incredible person, and one of the interesting things about him is that he was accepted ultimately by many segments of Judaism, all kinds of Jewish people. In fact, even in the Reformed movement, you know, which is nothing to write home about, whatever, he was accepted as the person who restored the dominance or the primacy of the Hebrew language. He was a master Hebraist in terms of language. He wrote books on Digduk, Rabbi, and Melitza, which is the style of speaking and so on. So they have accepted him. His Mesilas Yesharim, of course, is one of the greatest Musas ever written, that is learned by anybody who even pretends to want to enter Musa or Avodah and so on, you know. So he was a master at that, and it was just extraordinary, his mastery of many, many disciplines. It is said that he was a master of Kabbalah of the Zohar and so on when he was 14 years old. You know, we don't even know what we're doing at 14, and he already was a master. And there's many Sfarim that he wrote. One of them is one of the greatest Hashkafa Sfarim ever written, the Das Tfunas. And he wrote it when he was only 28 years old. It's astounding that somebody at that youthful age can write a book which reveals unbelievable secrets about the divine plan and the divine agenda. I mean, you can go on and on and on and talk about this man. And the reason why I celebrate his Yortzeit is because he had a profound effect on myself. I got into Ramchal when I was in 1962, which is a long time ago. And I recognized his uniqueness and his greatness. And I decided, therefore, to study his works in depth to the extent that I was able to do and so on, you know. But anyway, so this entire Shiur is dedicated to the elevation of his soul. Now, what I want to do tonight is talk about, you know, how does all this fit in the divine agenda? I mean, what we've seen is history in the making. That's really what we've seen. We are living in historical times. Whoever heard of a former president, right, being indicted? 34 counts. A former president for what? For falsifying business records? I mean, that sounds like he stole a library card. So for that, he's being charged. I mean, you gotta be kidding. I mean, it's like, what is this, an Alice in Wonderland scenario? Because that's exactly what it seems like. So this has profound implications for what God wants, what He's doing, and so on, you see. And what the bottom line is of all of this. And that's what I want to offer tonight. Now, there's something very important. Whenever you want to figure out what's doing, the secret is to find a chazal. Usually in the Gemara. Could be in the Mishnah, could be in the Midrash. It's to find a Gemara that somehow you realize that there's a secret behind what the Gemara is saying. You see, and it alludes to many, many profound ideas. Every single matter in Chazal reveals something, but many times it's concealed, it's cloaked in terms of what they really want to say. Well, I believe I found it. Okay? I believe I found what Chazal say, but in a very cryptic manner, about today's time. Okay? And that Gemara is in Sanhedrin. The last Perek Chelek. And here's what it says. It's really an astounding Gemara, but it warns us what's going to be, specifically in the Messianic era. If you want to understand many, many of the events of history as understood by Chazal, you have to find it. It's somewhere in the Gemara or the Medrash, the Mishnah or the Tanakh or whatever, right? And I think I found it. Now, it's quite cryptic, but it's very, very important because it warns us what is about to happen, especially at the end of time. And that's really what this is all about. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin, Masechta Sanhedrin, in Perek Chelek, an astonishing Gemara. It says there that there are many of the rabbis, for instance, Rabbi Yochanan and another one, Ilfa, and these are very great people and so on. So they say, Yesei, let him come, who the Mashiach. But I don't want to be there. I don't want to see it. That's what they say. Let the Mashiach come, right? Of course. But I do not want to witness this. That's incredible. You don't want to be around when the Mashiach makes his entry? And they say no. So the question is, what in the world does that really mean? You know, how could you say that? Clearly then, we begin to understand, right, that they were afraid because they realized that tremendous suffering is going to ensue before he comes. And now, rabbis are not afraid of difficult times. I mean, the thousands of years of human history is always going to be difficult times. So why would they say, you know, we don't want to be around by the greatest moment in history when the Mashiach arrives, which will completely turn around the entire world? It has to be because they were tremendously afraid because of the great suffering that would happen at that time. The question is, what can they be afraid of? Rabbi's not afraid of, like I say, difficult times. They're not going to be able to make a good living, whatever. No. What is a tzaddik afraid of mostly? I will tell you, there are different kinds of people, but they all have this in common. People are really tzaddikim. What is that? They're afraid of what's called miyut or, the diminishment of light. That's what miyut or means. The diminishment of spirituality. They're afraid of that. Why? Because they want spirituality. They want to be close to God. So the worst thing that they can anticipate is there's no spirituality. It's terrible. And the second thing that they're afraid of, right? So not only is there no spirituality, miyut or, the diminishment of light, spiritual light, right? Not only that, because there's no scholars, there's no Talmid Chachamim, or whatever, but because of Tigburis Hora, the growth of evil, which is the block to spirituality. Tigburis Hora. That's it. Those are the two things that frighten them, you see, because that is their entire world and existence and so on, right? So if they're telling you, right, that we don't want to be around when the Mashiach comes, that tells us that if you have that what the amount of darkness and evil, right, darkness from spirituality and evil from the behavior of man will be unimaginable, will be unfathomable, and we don't want to see it. We cannot, even though the reward of that obviously is, hey, we're going to see the Mashiach, right? But we don't want to see it. That's how bad. That is a wake-up call, you see. So if you're wondering why in the world is everything so bad, that's why. They're telling us, it's almost a prophecy, you see, that this is what's going to happen at the end of time. You see, the lack of spirituality, which will be exponential, and the enormous ignorance of spirituality and Torah, and the incredible amount of evil. You know, and believe me, they're strong people. If anybody could have tolerated that, they could. But they don't want to tolerate it. They don't want to be around. Ye say, let him come, lo yachmine. I don't want to see it. I don't want to be around. So we realize this is not good. That if you are in the end of time, you're going to see stuff that you will not believe humans are capable of. Okay, that is my intro. And that is the Chazal that tells us, be careful. That if you happen to be at the end of time, that's where you happen to be because you couldn't avoid it, this is what's going to happen. Okay, now, in memory of the Ramchal, right, I'm going to read something where this is the beginning of the explanation of what is a very important facet of Hashkafa. And I'm going to read the Ramchal, so you will actually hear what he says, and you will realize this is the basis for what I have said a long time ago, you know, in terms of what has to happen at the end of time. So let me read this to you. Inyon Esav, this is found in a sefer which he wrote, Kinnis Hashem Tzavokus, the jealousy of God, the Lord of hosts. Okay, and it's in the second chelek, which is the second part of that sefer, and it's in a section called Inyon Esav, the subject matter of Esav. And the Ramchal is going to reveal something which is shocking, you know, and he actually says it openly. And this is the source of, you know, how I know what is happening, and so on. Because it lays down the bedrock foundation of certain astonishing concepts, which I'm going to read to you. And then I'm going to elaborate on that, and we will see from that can be derived what is happening today, you see. And what Chazal said, let him come and I don't want to be there, you could see how accurate it was. Okay, here's what he says. Da, no. Ki shirish li Esav, the root of Esav, right? He's talking about Esav, the son of Yitzchak, the brother of Yaakov. We know from the story, right, in the Chumash, Esav was obviously a very unusual person, but it said he had an incredible tendency to want to worship idols, just to be evil, and so on. And he did become very evil, and so on. But he was the twin brother of Yaakov, which itself is astounding. They have two brothers, you see. Let's see what the Ramchal says. That Shirish Esav, the root of Esav, Hoya Barishoina, was at first, which means when he was born, and actually until he was 15 years old, or 13 years old, whatever. So Hoya Barishoina was at first B'Kedusha. He was holy, which is completely at variance with what most people think. Ramchal is saying that Esav was very holy. Right, wasn't the Russia. He was a holy person, B'Kedusha. So he mentions the Kabbalistic place in the spheres. V'hu b'gvuras tat tferes. He was located, or he emanated from, a sphere called the Gvur of Tferes of Zer Anpin. I'm obviously not going to go into that, but that's where his neshama radiated from, you see, whatever, and so on. And from this particular location in the spheres, okay, from the right side of that sphere, Yaakov neshama emanated. He's telling you the source of the soul of Yaakov Avinu. But that's the right side, because Teferes is a middle. As we know, the sphere of Chesed is on the right side, the sphere of Gevura is on the left side, and then there's this sphere, which is a divine emanation, which is a merger, you see, and that's smack in the middle. In any case, so Yaakov comes from the right side of Teferes, because remember, every middle has a right and it has a left, or else it wouldn't be a middle. So the neshama of Yaakov Avinu emerges from the right side of Teferes. But wait a minute, there's also a left side of Teferes, from that sphere. So he says, U'mechinas hasmoil, and from the left side of Teferes, Sheboy, right, Yotze Esav. Esav comes out of the same sphere as Yaakov Avinu. And we're talking here about Avos. That's what we're talking about. So from the right side of Teferes is Yaakov, and from the left side is Esav. Now you know why they're twins. Because they both emerge from the same sphere. Teferes, exactly. But not only are they twins, they are equal in Kedusha. Esav is as great as Yaakov Avinu in terms of his potential. Right? Okay. Ramchal says. And that's why they're twins. Because they both emanate from the same spiritual source. And what I'm telling you now is a tremendous secret, and it is a secret, right, where it says in Malachi, Perek Aleph, Pasuk Beis, right, Haloi Och Esav liYaakov. Behold, Esav is a brother to Yaakov. The Pasuk actually is alluding to the fact that Esav, right, emanates from the same spiritual source as Yaakov Avinu. Fine. Now what he says, listen to this. Ki be'emes, because in truth, b'madrega achas hoyu b'tchila, they were equal. We're talking about Yaakov Avinu, who Chazal consider the greatest of the Avos. Okay? I mean, Yaakov Avinu was, forget about it, he's incomprehensible. The greatness of his neshama, right? So the Ramchal says that at the outset, which means when after they were born and they began to grow up and so on, right? They were at one level, equal to each other. That means Yaakov was as great as Esav, and Esav was as great as Yaakov. Could you believe this? Most people won't believe this, but the Ramchal is saying this, and this is a very profound Kabbalah. Ein Yitzchak v'Yishmael, but Yitzchak was the son of Avram, and Yishmael was also the son of Avram, even though they both came from Avram Avinu, and they were also very great. We don't realize Yishmael was a very great person, but he also changed, became evil, just like Esav. You see. So he says that Yitzchak and Yishmael, both children of Avram Avinu, were not the same. Yishmael obviously was born from Hagar, whereas Esav was born from Rivka. So that automatically is a tremendous difference. But anyway, that's what he says. Okay, now, Shagam, and listen to what he says, Shagam Esav, Hoyo Yochol Liyos Kodosh. Esav could have been as great as Yaakov Avinu, right? V'yeh Shneim, and both of them, Bonim Tovim Hashem, would have been tremendous children of God. Okay. Now, I will tell you what happened, but I want to just add to this that there's a Rishon, which is one of the earlier sages, Chazal. His name is the Paniach Raza. Okay, what he says is astounding. He says, really, okay, Esav, the gematria of Esav is double the gematria of Yaakov. And what that means is that had Esav not become a Rasha, had he maintained his Kedusha, not only was he as great as Yaakov, no, he was twice as great as Yaakov Avinu. That's what the Paneach Raza. In fact, the Medrash says that had Esav not done what he did, which becomes a Rasha, then he would have had 6 Shvatim from Esav. And Yaakov would have had 6 Shvatim, right? I mean, you have any idea what that means? How great Esav could have been, that he would have had 6 tribes. You see, it's astounding when you think about that, you know. So, really, no, Ramchal continues, Ki shnei dvorim tzrichim lehosos echad. The Ramchal is now going to say, why do we have 2 people like that? What does it mean to be born from the same sphera and to be at least as great as each other? You see, what does that mean? So what Ramchal says, it reveals a very profound concept, that they really had to be born, you see. Why? Together in one sphere, because there are 2 basic jobs that the Jewish people have in order to accomplish the tikkun, right? So, tikkun hakidusha, in order to bring about tremendous holiness, besoid his pashtus kedusha b'madregoseho. In other words, the first job of a Jew is to bring down holiness, the light of the spheres, or the light of the Ein Sof, into this world, because God left it out. And that's the test of the Jewish people. It used to be the test of mankind. How much are you going to fill this planet with my Ein Sof, with my presence, Shechina? You see. So that's one job. The Echad, and the other job, right, is Kfiyas HaSitra Achor Tachas HaKedusha, is to subdue the evil of the Satan underneath Kedusha, to subjugate him, to bring him under holiness. There you are, 2 jobs. That's the concept of Sur Me'ira V'asei Tov, right? Sur Me'ira means turn away from evil. V'asei Tov ain't do good. So therefore you have 2 jobs. One job is to bring down holiness, which was denied the world, okay? And that would be the job of Yaakov. That's why he was a Yoshiv Holam. See, that's why he was a dweller of tents. Tent means he used to learn, right, to bring down Kedusha. But Esav, his job was to subdue evil, which means to go into the evil environment. Therefore, he was an Ish Sadeh, a man of the field. His job was to go into the field and remain righteous, remain a tzaddik, and therefore he would subdue evil with his righteousness. You see? Therefore, we see something which is very, very important. Okay, so the Ramchal says, "V'ispashtis hakedusha hoyo nogei Yaakov." The job of bringing down holiness, right, was a job of Yaakov Avinu. Ukfiyas hasitra achra b'chol madregoseha, and to subdue evil with all its levels of evil, right? Hu nogea le'esav. You see, that was nogea to Esav. You see, so what do we realize? We realize that the tikkun process has two fundamental jobs. One is somebody who combats with evil, engages with it, subdues it by remaining righteous, and the other brings down holiness by involving himself intensely in acts of holiness, especially learning Torah. You see? Therefore, what do we realize? They're partners, right? They're partners. That means the avodah of Klal Yisrael is subdivided into these two areas. You see? And you'll notice that there are people that have to go to work in the sense of, let's say they have to go to work on Wall Street and subject themselves to a tremendous amount of nisyonis, tests and temptations. Why? Because their job is the job of Esav, to subdue evil by remaining righteous. And then there are guys who are zoicha to learn all day, for years, or to open a yeshiva or a kollel, or become a rabbi, a rav of a shul. Their job is to spread holiness. It's interesting. They are replicating the jobs of Yaakov and Esav. It's a partnership. The Rebbeinu Shem needs both, you see. So the Ramchal continues and says something very interesting. The only way Esav could do this, right, is Shosha. You see? The only way Esav could do that is Esav had to emanate from the left side of Tferes. And that is the mokum of the Satan. In other words, Esav's root, neshama, is in the same sphera, believe it or not, as the Satan. And therefore, it's a patriarch against a patriarch of evil. And since they both come from the same root, if he was deny the conquest of the Satan, he would destroy the Satan. So Esav had to be born from that side. That's why Esav in the beginning was not evil. On the contrary, it looks like he was evil. He had tremendous evil tendencies, you see, because that was his job, you see, in order to subdue that temptations and so on. This is what the Ramchal is saying, you see. So therefore he had to emerge from that side, which is the same side where the Satan emerges, so he could destroy him. That's why we look in the Torah and we see that before Esav is even born, he's already running to serve idols. That's not what he was, but he had to be born with the tendencies of that Yetzer Hara to say, no, I will not do it. And therefore he would destroy the Satan. So you can imagine, you know, what Esav was and so on, you know. So therefore, this is what the Ramchal says, and this is the Ramchal. So he's revealing a profound secret in terms of who Esav was. But what I'm trying to show you, right, is the whole concept that there's a partnership here. Unfortunately, we know, right, that Esav became evil. Instead of subduing the Satan, he joined the Satan. He committed terrible sins. You know, he killed people. He had tremendous illicit relationships with other men's wives. I mean, he was a real chevraman, as they say, and so on. So he bombed, to use the modern English expression. So what did the Rebbeinu Shem do? So the Rebbeinu Shem is never at a loss, obviously, because it's a partnership. You don't realize something. If Esav is not around, who's going to do the job? There's no such thing as, well, now Yaakov will do the job, but who's contending with the Satan? It's not Esav anymore because he joined us something. So what did the Rebbeinu Shalom do? What did God do? And the answer is something incredible. He gave the job of Esav to Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu went piggyback. So Yaakov now had two jobs. He had the job of Kedusha, but now he had the new job of Esav, right? Because Esav was a Rasha, to do the job of Esav. That's what happened. And that's why once Yaakov accepted the brachas, the blessings of Yitzchak, right? What did he do, Yaakov? He had to go to Lavan. I mean, he had to go into the field to subdue evil, you see. But the interesting thing about it, and I'll just mention this, no man can do two jobs like that because they require different natures. The nature of Yaakov is one thing, and the nature of Esav, right, as a field man, is something else. So Yaakov, it's true, now has the job of Esav. And by the way, that's why he married Leah, who was supposed to be the wife of Esav. Because once he took over the job of Esav, right, he married his wife. You know, that's what happens. Because Leah was the perfect partner to Esav, without getting more into that. But therefore, what happened? But no man could take over two jobs, because they have different natures. You see? So therefore, what happened? Somebody else had to take over Esav's job, the other half. And who was that? Yosef. Now you understand who Yosef was. Yosef was half of a patriarch because he had taken over half the job of Esav. Fascinating, you see? And since Yosef had taken over the job of Esav, he now had to go into what's called the Klippa. That's why he went to Egypt, in order to go into the Tumah, you see, into the evil, become the Ish Sadeh. That was formerly the job of Esav, you see. And that's why Yosef was able to have two tribes. His soul was so great that he himself could give birth to two tribes, Menashe and Ephraim, because he really was half a patriarch. He was greater than the other Shvatim tribes. In any case, that's basically half the story of Chumash Precious. But in any case, that's who we see, that Esav really was an Ov, twice as great as Yaakov, but he made a terrible mistake, and of course, he became a tremendous Rasha, and so on. In any case, what happens now? You see, now what is interesting is that we learn that, wait a minute, is Esav finished? And the answer is, I don't want to get into, I once gave a whole shiur. If you search back several years, you'll find a whole shiur about Esav and so on, you know. But what comes out is that Esav wanted to do tshuva, right? When he met Yaakov Avinu, instead of killing him, he said to him, Yehi lecha sheloch, let that which is yours be yours. And what that means is that the blessings that you stole from me, and you went to Yitzchak and you stole it from me, right? It's okay, you can keep it. They're yours. That meant that Esav did tshuva. And he would have done tshuva. He needed a real push. So Yaakov Avinu should have given him Dinah. That's why God was very mad at Yaakov for not giving him Dinah, and God subjected Dinah to become the victim of Shechem, without getting into that, and so on. But in any case, so that's why God said, because you wanted to do tshuva, but you denied the opportunity because of a misunderstanding of Yaakov Avinu, you will do tshuva in the end, and you will fulfill your role to be a partner to Yaakov Avinu. That's an incredible remark. You see, where do we see this? Well, what is interesting is that when when Rivka was having tremendous birth problems because Yaakov and Esav were fighting in her uterus, so she had no idea what was going on. So the Torah tells us that she went to the yeshiva of Shem V'Over, and obviously there were Nevi'im in that yeshiva. So she said, what gives? What is this? So they told her nevuah. Now what most people don't realize is that nevuah is not just a nevuah of that time that she was going to give birth to Yaakov and Esav and twins and so on, Shem v'Eva told her, they told exactly what was going to be until the end of time. Most people don't realize that. How? Here's what they said. Shnei goyim bivitnech. There are two great goyim, Rashi teaches, translates Geim, two tremendous nations that you carry in you, okay? And then that's the first part, right? And umima'ayri poredu. But what will happen is they will separate from you, which means that they will take different paths. Really, right? But that could be understood, right? That Yaakov has one path, Kedusha, and Esav has another path to subdue evil. But that's not what they meant. They meant Yaakov will become a tremendous tzaddik, and Esav will take another path and become a tremendous rasha. They were predicting what would happen, you see. Then they said, they will have an unusual relationship. You see, it's not that he goes his way and Esav goes his way. No. They will be connected together where only one can flourish. Only one can prosper at any given time. If Yaakov is great, then Esav is low. And if Esav is great, then Yaakov is low. In other words, they actually have a relationship here. They're not two independent nations. You see, their fate is tied together. And we know why, because they're really partners. It's interesting, even if you become evil, you cannot remove your tafkid, your purpose, you see. But then they come out with an incredible statement. So what's going to happen with these two people, right? So in the end it says, V'rav yavitzoyer, but the older Rav will serve the younger. That's an incredible statement. That means it's not lost. In the end of time, the older will serve the younger. There it is. They're telling Rivka that your child, one of them, will do tshuva and he will return to become again partners. Now that doesn't mean that, which of course it happened to be Esav, is going to be the equal of Yaakov. Of course not. But Esav will resume to a certain extent his role in assisting Yaakov to do the tikkun. So this is a nevuah. This is a prophecy, right, of almost 4,000 years. It's not the only immediate time that they're prophesying. It goes for the end of time. Very, very important concept, you see. So this is what we see. This is the nevuah itself. In any case, now, from here we can begin to understand something which is very important, which most people are not familiar with. Okay, Rashi comments on the pasuk, Shnei goyim bivitnech. There are two great nations within you. Okay, and of course we know the Yaakov and Esav. But Rashi says, when was the ideal relationship? That there were two great nations and they were partners. And it doesn't mean that they were equal, but they had a kesher together. They had a tremendous connection. So Rashi brings down that this was between Yaakov Avinu, or rather between Rabbeinu HaKadosh, right, and Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. Rashi says this, okay? These are the Shnei Goyim Bivitnech. Now Marcus Aurelius Antoninus was a philosopher. He wrote the book Meditations from Marcus Aurelius. So obviously he was a profound thinker. You see, he wasn't but he was also Roman emperor. He was a Roman emperor for about, 20, 30 years, which is amazing when you think about that, And he was this, Marcus Aurelius. So Rashi points out that was the great relationship that they had, right? That they can be titled that they are Shnei Goyim b'vidnech, two great nations within you. Marcus Aurelius, Antoninus, and Rabbeinu HaKodesh, right? One of the greatest of the Chazal, the author of the Mishnah, and so on. And this is what it says. Okay, now, therefore, what is interesting, what was their relationship? Well, apparently, because Rabbi lived in Eretz Yisrael, and a Roman emperor usually lives in Rome, in Italy. But apparently, for many years, Marcus Aurelius lived in Tiberias, and he met Rabbi. Now, why is that so astounding? Let me tell you 3 stories of Marcus Aurelius and Rabbi. And this is not an accident, because it's going to lead to our understanding of what is happening in America. I don't know if you know it, but Rome had issued an edict that anybody who practices Mila, among other things, is subject to the death penalty. So Chazal bring this down. Okay? So, the mother of Rabbi, okay, had Rabbi. And Rome accused her, because they were a prestigious family. What do you mean? You cannot have kids. You circumcised your child. You therefore are subject to the death penalty. Now, for whatever reason, they said to her, Roman officials in Rome said, okay, here's what we want. We want you to bring so she denied it. So they said to her, you bring your child, Rabbeinu HaKodesh, as an infant, you bring him to Rome. And we'll check it out to see if he's circumcised or not. Okay? So what she did, she went to Rome on her way. On the way to Rome, it's amazing, she stopped at an inn. Because to go from Israel to Italy, obviously takes a long time. So she met there, the mother of Marcus Aurelius. Right. Now, I don't know what Marcus Aurelius' mother was doing in that inn. What the historical station was and so on. So for some reason they hit it off. The mother of Marcus Aurelius and the mother of Rabbi, right, they hit it off. So she asked her, the mother of Rabbi, why you going to Rome? So she explained, right, I got to bring my child to show them that he is, not circumcised, but obviously he is. So they're going to kill him. They're going to kill me and kill him. So the mother of Marcus Aurelius said to her, I will do you a tremendous favor. I will give you my child, Marcus Aurelius, an infant, and you'll take him and you'll give me your child, Rabbi, right? And you take him and you show him to the Roman officials, because obviously my child is not circumcised. And that's what happened. So Marcus Aurelius, as an infant, was responsible for the life of Rabbi. You can believe that? So therefore, that is an unbelievable, because without Rabbi, where would we be? Could you imagine he was one of the people he was the person, even though he was an infant, that was responsible for the life of Rabbeinu HaKodesh. And we can't even begin to understand what kind of reward that is, even as an infant. You see. So automatically at birth, Marcus Aurelius was assisting Rabbi, right? And Marcus Aurelius is going to be a Roman Empire, and we know Rome is a derivative of Esav. So the Rebbeinu Shem arranged it where Marcus Aurelius saved the life of Rabbi. Rome, right? Saved the life of the person that would spread Torah throughout the Jewish people. So already we see something's happening here, that the Rebbeinu Shem is connecting these two people. Very important idea. And we don't even know what kind of reward that is. Anyway, that's number one. Second story, okay, at the time it was about 180 CE, okay, and the problem is that Rabbi realized, who was one of the greatest sages, and he was the Nasi, he realized that the Jews are going to go into exile, the Golus, you see. So he realized that each rabbi has his own version of Torah Sheba'al Peh, of the laws of the Torah. In other words, it wasn't one style or one book. Each rabbi had his own notes, and Rabbi realized this cannot be. There has to be what's called a standardized version of the entire oral law, right? And therefore, what do I have to do? So Rabbi realized I have to call a group meeting, a conclave of all the great Chazal, and I got to get them to tell me all their styles, and I will pick and choose the best one, which is what happened. And that's exactly what happened. They all got together. There was this humongous meeting. They came together, and Rebbe was able to hear the different styles, and he picked the best one, and that became the Mishnayos. That became the standard version of the oral law, which was critical for the Jewish people to learn Torah. Without that, we wouldn't know it. There would be no Gemara. There would be no oral law. It would be forgotten. You see? But what was the problem? The problem was you can't learn Torah because the Romans forbid it. You see? So in 180 CE, who was the emperor? Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. You see? So what he did is he issued a decree. Any sage can learn Torah. And he permitted the gathering of all the Chazals, you see, so because they needed a place and a time of tranquility to do this. I mean, it's a major, a project to create a Mishnayos of all the different versions of the oral law. And the one who allowed it to happen was Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. I mean, it's incredible when you think about that. So Rabbi was able to complete the Mishnah, right? And by 200 CE, you had the Mishnayos, so 210, whatever it was. But the one who was responsible for the Mishnayos, which is the entire oral law that we have, right, from which the Gemara comes from, was Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. When you think about that, it's incredible. Think about this. What is the reward of Marcus Aurelius, a guy, that he enabled the Jewish people to maintain their closeness, right, and their mastery of the oral law? We don't even comprehend that, you see. So that's a very important story to know. So that's a second tremendous attachment that Rebbe had with Marcus Aurelius. And they both involved spirituality. And then one more story. Rebbe was older, and Marcus Aurelius, the Gemara says, used to visit him. Imagine that. The Roman emperor used to visit Rebbe when he was in Tiberias. So Rebbe was much older, or they both were old, obviously. And what happened was Rebbe had a hard time climbing into his bed. You know, you get old, it's hard to move around, whatever. Your mobility suffers. What can I say? In any case, so he had a hard time getting into his bed. So Marcus Aurelius was talking to Rebbe then. So Rebbe didn't feel well, whatever. He didn't feel well. So he wanted to lie in bed while he was talking to the Emperor of Rome. And he was the Emperor of Rome, by the way. So Marcus Aurelius says, look, you're going to have a hard time getting to your bed. I'll do you a favor. I'm going to bend down on all fours. You put your foot on top of my back, right? Use me as a stool, as a step stool to get into your bed. This is the Roman Emperor. So Rebbe says, is this proper to use the Emperor of Rome as a footstool? That's what he says to Marcus Aurelius. So Marcus Aurelius says to him, Alavai, I should be your footstool in the coming world. That's incredible. So we see the tremendous relationship that it's not only that they were tremendous people. Rabbi was one of the greatest of the sages of the Jewish people. And Marcus Aurelius is the emperor of Rome, a descendant of Esav. So can you imagine this kind of relationship? And that's very important. So how does the Rebbeinu Shalom reward Marcus Aurelius? Think about that. What the reward of this person, right, who preserved the life, right? And here's where we begin to understand what happens. So we now know that at the end of time, right, that Esav, aka also known as Edom, aka also known as Rome, right, aka also known as Western civilization, right? And we know who Western civilization is. It's Russia, Europe, and America, all right? We now know this, very interesting. And I clearly believe that what the Rebbeinu Shalom did to Marcus Aurelius says, because what you did was so outstanding, that the Torah of the Jewish people is dependent on you. Talk about, enlisting Esav and his descendants. I will reincarnate you at the end of time, and you will be the person that Esav does tshuva, and you will help my people do the tikkun before Mashiach comes, but to bring the Mashiach, you see. But what is important is not only that, okay, but what is the job of Esav at the end of time? Kfir Sarah, just like the original partnership with Yaakov Avinu. The job of this person, whoever he's going to be, at the end of time, who is Esav doing tshuva. So he's a Gilgal, he's a reincarnation of Esav, who is a Gilgal, a reincarnation of Marcus Aurelius, and who is the one who's got that spot, that spotlight, right? Right now, Donald Trump, right? That's how we have to begin to understand who Donald Trump is, right? To show you that in many ways it's Marcus Aurelius that has been granted the unbelievable privilege to help the Jewish people. But it's more than that, you see, because Esav has become the Rash of Esav, the evil of Esav, because there's a part of Esav that is unbelievably evil, which is what Esav was. And then there's what's called the Tov Sheba Esav, the good part of Esav that is doing tshuva. And Donald Trump is the Tov Sheba Esav. Now, I'm not commenting on his character. I'm just telling you, basically, I don't want to get into his whole character and so on, not now anyway. But anyway, that Trump is, as far as I'm concerned, is a Gilgal of Marcus Aurelius, which is a Gilgal of Esav, which fulfills the prophecy of Rav Yavoy Tzoyer, because of their incredible former relationship and what Marcus Aurelius did for the Torah. Can we imagine a goy saved Torah Shabbat Peh for the Jews? How do we even begin to understand what that? We're talking about all the Jews, Torah, the whole Torah Shabbat Peh. It's not fathomable what the reward of that is for this guy, right? So that reward, what I see, is Trump. He's the one who's chosen to help the Jews do the tikkun, and not only that, but the real job of Esav is to fight the nations, because that's the real job of Esav. Remember, he's an ish sodeh. He's a man of the field, isn't he? He goes into the field and he withstands all the temptations, right? And he destroys the goyim. That's his job. That was his original job. And that's exactly what Trump has been doing. He is contending with all the nations of the world, the UN. I mean, it's astounding what the guy's been doing. The Arabs, the UN, Europe, Western Europe, Mexico, Russia. It's incredible what this guy's been doing in his first term as president, you see. So that, what I just told you, is a very important piece of the puzzle, you see, and so on, And look what he did. You should know, Yishmael, the Arabs, are at the brink of reverting back to the Jewish people in the sense of peace. He's the one who initiated the Abraham Accords. That's unheard of. Trump should have gotten the Nobel Peace Prize. Nobody ever did that. Over 100 years, nobody ever made peace between the Arabs. I mean, it's like, this is one of the greatest political coup ever known. And he got nothing. Why? Because he is now the greatest threat, that is Trump, to the Sultan. What you are witnessing is satanic, right? That's the origin of Trump derangement syndrome. You see, that's really what it's all about. Because if Trump helps the Jews do the tikkun, then the Sultan dies. And he knows that. So he is turning anybody that wants to listen, and believe me, it's a lot of people, and and so on, against Trump. It's satanic. You don't realize, because what is happening to Trump is unheard of in American history. Like, hey, you don't like the guy? Okay. But he was a very good president. Anybody that's honest sees that. What do you hate the guy for? Usually if you don't like a guy, you don't like his policies, right? But they hate. It's a gut hatred. That's what you see. This is not normal. It's psychotic. Because it's not justified in reality. When you really think about that, okay, you disagree with his policies or you don't like his character, he tweets too much, fine. But the hatred that people bear for Trump is lo ya'uman. It's not believable. It's just incredible. Why? Well, what explains this irrational behavior, psychotic behavior? And the answer is Satan. It's satanic. Because the repercussions of Trump becoming president and helping the Jews, especially helping the Jews make peace with the Arabs, and Trump denies and defies the UN, the Arabs, right? The whole world he defies, you see, is the greatest danger to the Sultan. So we're looking at an unbelievable spiritual dilemma that the Sultan has. That's what's going on. You see, and that's his job, is Kfir Sarah. The original job of Esav is to fight the Tumah, what's called in Kabbalah the Klippa, the evil of Esav, right? And that's why we're witnessing things we've never seen before. It's absolutely irrational, and you could see the divine blessing. I mean, you think about that, as I will point out, how in the world does Trump survive this? And so on, which I will point out. But there's a problem, always a problem. Because you'll notice many people that are destined for greatness must be cleaned up. They have to be cleaned up. You see, Trump is going through this incredible humiliation, suffering, anxiety, although he doesn't look anxious, and so on. Why is he going through this? This never happened to a president. It hardly ever happened to a human, if you think about that. The entire United States government is arrayed against one man. You're talking about the FBI, the CIA, the IRS, Secret Service. It's incredible. They all hate this man, the intelligence services, right? And not only that, it's all the colleges, the anti-Semitism from all the eruptions against Trump and so on. And I'm not even going into the anti-Semitism and so on. So how do we explain the entire government is after one guy? Right. Because that's the evil of Esav, right? Against the good part of Esav. Why? So how do we begin to understand that? So what God is doing, which is interesting, and he's done this to many people, whoever is destined for greatness, believe it or not, will go through tremendous suffering before he becomes great. And there's a lot of reasons for that. For instance, let's say Avraham Avinu, before God could visit Avraham Avinu, he had to be tremendously suffer on the Nimrod. He threw him into a Kibshan Eish. He threw him into a furnace of fire. And who knows what other difficulties that Nimrod put Avraham Avinu through. Right? Look at the difficulty. He has to cleanse Avraham Avinu for whatever. And there are reasons for that. And then you have Yosef HaTzadik, 13 years in an Egyptian prison. And believe me, that was no picnic. A prison today is a palace considered to the prison of Egypt in those days, right? And Yosef had to be in prison for 13 years, right? And a slave and indictments for being with Potiph's wife and so on. It's incredible. And finally, what happened to Avram, we know. What happened to Yosef? Became the Grand Vizier of Egypt, right? Then the Jewish people, they had to go through Egypt for 210 years and suffer terribly, right? Again, and what happened in the end? They became the nation of God, and so on, the greatest nation of all in history, and so on. And even Moshe Rabbeinu, right? He was chased out of Egypt because he was accused of murder, right? And he was gone 54 years. He didn't see a Jew in 54 years, It's incredible. Before he could be given the greatness of being the greatest Navi and the giver of the Torah. So we see, and this goes on and on. Well, my belief is Trump is eventually going to come back, right? As Esav doing tshuva. You see? So he has to be cleaned up. When you see the tremendously divine assistance, when you take a look at this person and so on, he's 77 years old. Where does he get the energy to run around the United States? He's 77 years old, it qualifies as an old man. Forget about Medicare, right, and Social Security, right? What is it about? You compare him to Biden. Biden looks like a cripple compared to Trump and so on. Yet he seems to have energy which is boundless, and he stands in front of a crowd of 100,000 people in New Jersey, right? And he talks for an hour and a half, 2 hours. You know how much energy it takes to do that? And that's after he's been in court the whole day sitting, right? And that's just beyond belief. You show me one guy that can do that, and this is a guy who's subject to every vile attempt to destroy him, and it's amazing. A guy like this should have had 5 heart attacks already in terms of the anxiety and the stress. Could you imagine what stress he's under? That every day he's got the whole U.S. government arrayed against him? I guarantee you nobody would survive. Nobody. Who could stand that? The fear and the stress. And he doesn't even seem to be afraid. He has no health issues, as far as I know, right? How's a guy like that walk around with no health issues? It's absolutely incredible, Where's, like I say, the energy and the stamina? You don't think this is divine? You show me one guy that can replicate that type of behavior. It's impossible. Yet he does. He just seems to be impervious to danger and threat. It's just incredible. Why, or I should say how? That's the Ribono Shel Olam. Because God has to keep him healthy to be able to do the job that he's destined to do. To me, that's one of the greatest indications that he has an incredible mission. And therefore, he has to suffer, you see, and so on, Why is God doing this to him, suffering? Like I say, first idea is he has to atone. Look, Trump did a lot of things which are wrong and so on. No man is perfect. So before achieving that kind of greatness, I believe he has to have a kapara, atone. This suffering is an atonement. Not only that, we know Trump has a large ego, to say the least. God wants to humble him. He says, look, before you can take up my mission, you got to become a humble person. You know, I'm going to show you that really you're a nobody. And if not for my incredible assistance and grace, you'd be dead. So what God is doing is actually humbling Trump. Right. Then another idea. God wants Trump to destroy the Democratic Party. Right. How? Because he's got to get Trump so infuriated at what they're doing to him. I mean, the injustice beyond belief. God is infuriating Trump to destroy the evil people, the Democratic Party, Biden, and all the people that try to destroy him. You see. So he's infuriating him, making sure. Now I want to tell you something. It's not a matter of revenge. People don't understand. Trump must remove these people, the establishment or the swamp, right? Or the deep state. Why? Because you don't realize something, or maybe you do. They're not going to stop. Even if Trump wins the election, they're still going to try to destroy Trump in any way they can. They are going to infiltrate, you see, in order to destroy him. You see, they'll impeach him again. You see, because they have members of Congress and the Senate who are part of them. You know, it's astounding. He was president for 4 years, and they impeached him twice. That alone is a distinction in American history. Impeached twice for what? For a phone call? I mean, you laugh at what they impeached him for, right? Because they have to destroy him. Because it's like they see him as their mortal, as their innate enemy. You see, so they're going to try to destroy him just because he won. That's what they did the first time. So how do you protect yourself? You need to destroy them. You need to go after each one of these people because all of them are guilty of felonies, real felonies, not the sham that has been made up in the court now with this guy Marsham and so on, you know, real felonies, and he could take them all out. But what he needs is a great DOJ, Department of Justice, a DA. That's what he needs. Somebody who will really go after the whole Democratic Party and get rid of the top echelon. Because not everybody in the Democratic Party is evil, but the top echelon is terrible, and so on, you see. So that's why he has to take them out. Not for revenge, because they will continue to try to destroy him. And he has to be very careful. Trump made a tremendous mistake. He failed to understand the depth of resolve of evil, how bad they are, and what they are going to resort to kill him, you know. In fact, maybe if it wasn't for the Secret Service, they would assassinate him, and so on. But I believe that, of course, will never happen, because God is protecting him for obvious. We see that he is, and so on, you know. So that's why. It has nothing to do. Those people who say revenge, they don't know what they're talking about. And which is interesting. Do you have any idea what they stopped him from doing because of the impeachments? Every other day he was caught up in court or some committee to investigate him and so on. You see, what he could have done for America, another 10 times more if he would have been so tied up in court and in, you know, judicial committees and so on, you see. And now, of course, this particular, what has been happening now, you know, what has been happening now and so on, you know. I mean, this court case is one of the greatest injustices that I've ever seen. I mean, there's a famous lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, that has said, I mean, he's a famous lawyer, constitutional lawyer, criminal lawyer and so on, that in all 60 years of practicing law, Dershowitz says, he has never seen such what's called an ivus hadin. He has never seen such an obviously corruption of justice by this judge, Marsham and so on, you know. I mean, this is Dershowitz and so on. I mean, he's shocked, and he's right. The evil of this jury, this prosecutor, and this judge, we cannot even begin to describe. And I'll tell you why, what really, and this is something which is very important to consider. There are two things that God hates. Not only hates it, two sins. Not only does God hate it, but he will destroy civilization if it goes beyond a certain threshold. What are they? They are immorality. That's one, as exhibited by LGBTQ. And they are the corruption of justice. Why? Because that's the end of civilization. And God will not allow civilization to disappear or to die. Where do we see this? The Mabul, the people of the flood, right? What was their sin? So the Torah writes, Hamas, they had tremendous amount of what? Hamas, corruption, right? It was a tremendous distortion, deviation, or injustice that they practice, right? And the second thing where you see from the Medrash that what it says there, that God sealed the fate of the generation of the flood. Why? So it says there, what sealed their fate is that the fact that if a guy would want to marry an animal or a man would want to marry a man, he would have to write a ksuba, right? A marriage document, right? Spelling out his responsibilities. And this was this was sanctioned by the government, because he would have to write out a document which was enforceable in court. Did you believe this? The two very sins that can destroy civilization, that's exactly what the generation of the flood was engaged with. So what did God do? He destroyed the world. Do you have any idea what kind of a sin it has to be for God to want to destroy the world? That's like, is there any punishment greater than that? Of course not. And the second place that did this is Sodom. Sodom was an unbelievably evil place. Justice. If somebody robbed you, then the victim, he had to pay the robber. Why? What was the logic? Because if you didn't have that possession, the guy could never have stolen from you. Therefore, you're guilty. Excuse me. Are we in an Alice in Wonderland land? And that's exactly what they did. Talk about injustice and a mockery of justice. Talk about that, right? And also there's Mishkav Zachar all over the place. God destroyed Sodom in an unnatural way. It wasn't like there was some volcano in Israel and so on. He turned it over with fire and brimstone. It was completely unnatural. Why? Because they want to destroy civilization. You want to be unnatural? Guess what? I will kill you in an unnatural way. Measure for measure. Take a look at this world. What America has become. And it's not only America. America sealed its fate. See, we don't realize something, and I'll tell you something very interesting. It's not Trump that's on trial. America's on trial. Because America already is bad news, a rogue nation, because they have condoned and encouraged LGBTQ, which is automatically one of the things that God brought the flood for, right? And they've already done that. America is now totally subject to unbelievable sexual deviation. It's incredibly corrupt, and it's going to get much worse, right? So the last thing God was waiting for is, what about justice? Ivus Adin, right? Well, guess what? America, true to form, has now lived up to that. Because what they did is one of the greatest corruptions of justice ever seen, like Dershowitz said, which is incredible. This is what they've done, and so on. I mean, think about this. I'll just review just a couple of ideas, right? You know, the concept, you convict a former president based on what? Based on falsifying business records? Is anybody else convicted for that? You pay a fine or whatever. This is what you convict a guy on? You know, and not only that, there was exculpatory evidence that Bragg refused to even hear or present to the a grand jury and so on, And then there were witnesses that were denied the ability to be a witness. And they testified, no, this is not what happened. And then there's the witness, I think his name is Brad Smith, right? He said it's not even a crime. And he's the head of the Federal Bureau or Election Committee and so on. He knows the laws better than anybody else. He was refused, basically. Nobody wanted to listen to him and so on. It was just incredible to watch, And not only that, the judge should have recused himself. How in the world can you take a case when your daughter's making millions of dollars on a guilty verdict? It is forbidden to be a judge. I mean, you look at what Chazal, right? His daughter is a fundraiser for the Democratic Party. And she's making, won't she make $93 million or something like that? Of course he's going to say, and he lives with his daughter or something like that, right? Of course, he's got to rule in favor of his daughter, or there goes millions of dollars. You have any idea what kind of bribery that is, or what kind of self-interest? Not only, how could you hold a court like that in New York City? 85% of New York voted. They voted for Biden. New York is the worst place for a Republican or Trump to have a case. It is forbidden to be judged in New York. I mean, where's justice? But that's, so look how much stuff was done and so on, Witnesses denied. And then there was finally one witness, I think his name is Weisselberg. He was the main could have been the main witness that would have exonerated Trump, because he was the CFO and so on. He was not permitted to testify. And he would have testified. Trump doesn't even know about this. You see? And not only that, you have a witness giving testimony, what's called exculpatory, which is exonerates him. So not only is he not accepted, so what witness do they accept? Somebody that is convicted of perjury over and over again, right? Michael Cohen. So the jury listens to Cohen instead of Costello. I mean, it's beyond belief. How do you listen to it's forbidden to do that. The man is a convicted perjurer, right? Liar, over and over. In fact, he sat in jail for that, over and over again. So what credibility is there? Where's justice? On the contrary, when you look at Chazal, the Sanhedrin used to go out of their way to try to exonerate a person, not to make sure that he's found guilty, It's beyond belief what America did. And I'll tell you the worst thing America did, like I just said, God hates injustice. In fact, it says in Pirkei Avos, Perek Hey, Pasuk Yud Aleph, 11, right? That Ivas Adin produces a punishment of cherev, a sword, military. That means there will be something military that will be incredibly harmful to America. I think it may be, hopefully not, it may be another 9/11. That's the cherev that America may now witness, because that's what Pirkei Avos says, that Ivus Hadin brings cherev and so on, But what they have done is made a mockery of justice. America used to be the model, at least partially, of righteousness. They were decent, and now America is the laughing stock of the world. Not only so, America can't even tell another nation that's a banana republic, you can't do this. America has lost the high ground of morality. That's what's happened with America. How do they do that? Do they have any idea that the rage that Kaviyachol, so to speak, that God is in for what America has done? Not just for America, where everybody now laughs at courts. The whole DOJ, the whole court system is a mockery. You have any idea what that means? Mankind cannot survive when everybody's laughing at justice, which, by the way, is one of the 7 Noahide laws, courts, justice, and so on. How do you think God looks at this? Do they have even a shred of understanding what God is going to do to them when they stand in front of Him for judgment? That they made a mockery not only all over America, where America now realizes a two-tier system. And the whole thing was, it was so obvious that all of this is unjust. How do you do this kind of thing? As I pointed out, only a couple. You speak to any lawyer, they can't believe what just transpired. But the whole world laughs at America, and they laugh at justice. You can't do that and get away with it. They have no idea. And I repeat, and I said this in the last year. You want to know what God is going to do to those people who have just desecrated the name of God and His laws? That's what it is. They have made God look like a fool. What do they think God is going to do? And I mentioned the punishment, how severe it is, what's going to happen. And you know what's going to happen? Yeshayahu sees God prophetically. He's coming, and his garments on a horse, and his garments are all red, so which means they're covered in blood. God's garments are covered in blood. So Yeshayahu is afraid, and he says, this is not good, because he thinks God is coming to judge the Jews, because that's what the symbol is, you see. So God says to Isaiah, this is in Parashat Nitzavim, by the way, which was the Haftarah for 9/11, for those who don't know. In any case, so God says to Isaiah, Yeshayahu, says, no, this is not for the Jews. You're wondering why my clothing is red? Because I have just stepped on Esav. I stepped on them, and I squashed them. You see, like a grape producer that wants to produce wine from grapes. So he puts it in a big vat, and guess what? He goes into the vat, cleans his feet, I hope, right? And squashes the grapes, and all the juice spurts out. Well, guess what? I just did that to Esav. I stepped into the vat on top of Esav, and I squashed him. So his blood squirts all over the place, and it squirted on my garments. You have any idea what that kind of description is? It's unbelievable. This is what God did? Yes. This is the punishment of Esav, the evil of Esav. You see, the question is, how is that possible? And you're looking at it. You're not only looking at LGBTQ, which is the distortion of nature and so on, which will destroy civilization, right? But you're looking at the injustice of what has just happened, you see, to Trump and many other people that have supported Trump. And this, you should know one thing, it's not just Trump. We have no idea of the prosecutorial excess, outrage that is practiced in this country. We don't know, but there are many books written that talk about the prosecutorial overreach, how prosecutors have enormous power, you see. And some guy just wrote a book, I forgot the name of it, where he demonstrates that many justices are just, they don't practice justice. They're either very angry, so they convict the guy, or for what other motive they have. But they're all biased. You see, what do you mean? How could you do that? God is so tzedek tirdov, right? Justice, righteousness, you shall pursue, right? You're not allowed to do this. So people should see that the whole judicial system, from the judges to the prosecutors, you see, who gets tried, who doesn't get tried, should exhibit this type of unbelievable, immoral, and criminal behavior is beyond belief. And that's why God squashes Esav. But who's he going to squash? The Democratic Party. You have no idea what they've done to America. The history of the Democratic Party that supported slavery. I didn't want to go into what these people have done, but they are responsible for incredible amount of evil in the United States. And you see, and it's not just the Democratic Party. You're looking at the government. This government has no idea what they're going to get, because they are the government, the Senate and the House. Each one of them has a responsibility to practice righteousness and fairness and justice, Right. Is that what they do? They don't. One of the lowest ratings in the history is the government. It's terrible what their rating is, what their belief, what people hold them in contempt, and so on. And you see why. Because they do nothing, right? What do you mean? You have an idea that this will make you guilty in the eyes of God to be a senator and do nothing? You are responsible to govern righteous. They don't know. Quit. It's better not to be in the Senate or the House rather than stand in front of God and God looks at you and say, what did you do? Why did you do this? Where were you? It's true that you're part of a body, so you need a lot of votes and so on, but you did nothing. Where were you when all this criminal behavior, it's incredible to watch the cities across America, the crime is beyond belief. You can't walk in the subway anymore. You can't walk in a city anymore. You'll be mugged or punched in the face or whatever. Everybody's afraid to walk in the cities. So the question is, well, who's responsible? And the answer is the mayors and the governors. Do they have any idea what God is going to do to them when He says to them, where were you? And the DAs, you don't even want to be 100 miles next to a DA when he's standing judgment in front of God, because they have made a mockery of justice and nobody does anything. Look, I can go on and on for hours with this stuff, but if you want to know what's going to happen to them, remember the prophecy of Isaiah, right? They are going to be squirted like a grape man, right, who wants to make grapes, and their blood is going to spurt right on the clothing of God. And it's not me saying this, right? It's Isaiah. I'm just repeating a Navi, So people have to wake up. The DAs have to wake up. They have no idea what's going to happen to them. In any case, this is what is happening, and because they have made an incredible mockery of justice, you see. Anyway, to review, I believe that's why we now understand incredible ideas. Who Esav really is. That Esav became a Russia. That in the end of time, the nevuah, the prophecy, is that he will do tshuva. Because he wanted to do tshuva, right? And Rashi's comment on the perfect relationship by Shnei Goyim B'Vidnech, two great nations, was Antoninus, Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, and Rabbi. And what the relationship between these two, right? And it wasn't that Marcus Aurelius was a good friend of Rabbi. He saved Torah, right? Without him, Rabbi could never have written the Mishnah, which is incredible, you see. And he saved Rabbi's life. We have no idea what God considers that, you see. So I believe, very simply, that God said, you will be incarnated again, and you will be the Esav that does tshuva. I think that makes unbelievable sense. And if anything, Trump doing tshuva is not even enough to reward Marcus Aurelius for saving the Jewish people. You see, and that's why I believe he's zoicha to be Esav doing tshuva, and more important, to help the Jews do the tikkun, right? And that's why we read about the Medrash that Esav is in Gan Eden, right? And the wonder, of course, is how in the world did he get to Gan Eden? Because that's what it is, and so on. But anyway, so this is and therefore Trump, because of that privilege, is subject terrible suffering, just like many great people that are about to enter a tremendous station will suffer for the reasons that I said, and it's in one way it's unfortunate, but the reward is incredible. It's like Yosef HaTzadik. It's true he was a prisoner for 13 years in an Egyptian prison, which is obviously terrible. But think about that. He was the Grand Vizier. It doesn't make any sense. Think about this, right? Just because Yosef offered some advice to Paroi of how to deal with a famine, okay, so you know what you do? You write out a check and you give him a consultant fee. Because that's all he did. He advised Paroi. Basically,
But Paro didn't do that. He made him Grand Vizier. And like Paro said, only I will be greater than you. Excuse me, for what? Every president or pharaoh has advisors. You don't make the guy the Grand Vizier right up to Paro. So why did he do it? Because he had no choice. Because Yosef paid his dues, right? By suffering and so on, and being humiliated. Can you imagine what it is being in a prison for 13 years with no hope of being saved at all, and so on, and the humiliation with Fatifa's wife and so on, right? Whatever reason why God wanted to do that, to humble him, we have no idea why that happened. But in the end, so for the next 80 years, or 90 years, whatever, he lived to 110, right? So for the next, and he was a Grand Vizier at 30, so for the next 80 years, he was the Grand Vizier of Egypt, which is incredible. I believe that's exactly what's happening to Trump. And so therefore what I would tell Trump, if I could, be brave, don't worry. Everything in the end will turn out extraordinary, because you have been given, hopefully, a tremendous merit that you can help the Jewish people come back to God, come back to their Torah, come back to their religion, and not only that, and then eventually, change the entire world to become righteous. Thank you.